Hi, everyone. So, welcome to the welcome to the silent inner source disco. That is an interesting experience for me as well. I guess silent disco means, first of all, it's perfectly fine for you at any point to kind of just get up and move your body to the vibes of inner source. And the second is I can see who's following my talk, and when you tune into another color, I know I'm losing the audience. Which okay, I'm gonna try to make it entertaining. Okay, all right. So, what is inner source? There are many definitions, but I like this one the most. It's very concise. Inner source is like open source, except everything stays within the company. Easy enough. Uh, Let me give you another more personal approach. So, my mom and I talk, obviously, and so the other day, a while ago, she asked me, "What is it that you actually do in your job?" And she knows I work for Mercedes, but she also knows that as an IT guy, I don't actually build cars. So I tell her about open source, about inner source, collaboration, and all these things, and she listens and she's like, "Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It has been predestined for you." I'm like, "Predestined? What do you mean?" And she says, "Come walk with me." Okay, so every time I visit my parents, my mom and I like to go on extended walks, and we just chew the fat. And on this particular day, she took me to a place where I had been many times as a kid. So um, I come from a small city called Mülheim an der Donau. It's about 3,500 inhabitants, and it's been a city actually for more than 1,000 years, or around 1,000 years. It is about 2 hours south of Stuttgart, closer to the Lake of Constance in southern Germany, and it's actually it's a pretty town. Here's it has old timber framed houses. There is a castle, and the Baron's family still lives in that castle. I was friends with one of the daughters in school, and I mean, imagine you can say at a party, "Oh yeah, this is my house." Yeah, bro. But so they actually still live there. And here, this is Mülheim is located on the beginning of the Upper Danube Valley, and this is really pretty. Like really the river, and you have the rocks and so forth. It's really nice. Natural park, Upper Danube Valley. And in that park are some special nice things. And so here's the city. My parents' house is right around here, and if you walk about 1.5 kilometers, you get to a place where a little river has its origin, comes out of the mountain right there. It's called Wulfbach. It's a very small stream, actually, because again, it is about 2 kilometers and it goes into the Danube River. Everybody knows the Danube, right? So, what is special about the Wulfbach? It, so, it looks, when you go there, it looks like this, very unspectacular. Or here's another view. But the cool thing is, this is actually the beginning of a cave system that is the second largest cave system in the Swabian Jura, the Schwäbische Alb. It has been so far researched to about 6.5 kilometers, and you can't just like everybody go inside because it's really an advanced thing. You have to do cave diving, and it's kind of dangerous. So it's sealed off to the general public. But as a kid, I always found that very fascinating. So I would stand there and look and go, "Oh, nice. One day, I want to go inside in that cave and see what's there." And one day, I stood there just as two cave divers came out. I'm a little kid, and I look at these people, and they look like they just came from Mars. I'm like, "Whoa, I want to do this one day." Okay, so I have gotten into diving. I'm an avid scuba diver. For some time I even worked in the dive industry. I have dived caves, but this is unfortunately way too advanced for me. It's even you're not allowed to go in there without a special permit. So I have to this day not yet been there. But Maybe, okay. I don't know. Maybe, maybe one day I will. So anyway, on that day, my mom took me there, and she points to it, and she says, "There you go." Blank stare on my face. What do you mean? She's like, "I always knew you would get into this line of work. It makes perfect sense." What? She's like, "Look, this is where the river comes out of the mountain. This is its source. And obviously, it's open. Duh. Inner open source." So there you go. I was like, okay, thanks, Mom. That I thought that was really nice. So as we stand there, and look, I reminisce and like, it's true. Is this the open source? Now, when you go inside, you will see something like this. This is a generated image. It looks a bit similar. I've seen an actual real image taken by the cave researchers, but it wasn't open source. I wasn't allowed to use it. It looks something like this. So this is the river's inner source. And it is a perfect example of how inner source can lead to open source. A lot of times companies say, we'll practice in inner source first and then we go open source. So this is kind of how that works. And here's another thing. This is a picture of the Blautopf in Blaubeuren, which is very close to Ulm, where I live now. And this also is the entrance to another cave system, the biggest so far discovered cave system on the Swabian Jura. And it's a little lake. It's very clear water. You have to dive down there. Again, it's sealed off for the general public. A few people have died there, actually. So, but it's really interesting, but you have to take a lot of effort, and it's very unclear where you'll end up. And so this, ladies and gentlemen, is an example of closed source. Makes things a bit more complicated at times, right? So this is why we like open source and inner source. All right, so that was that. Now, in the remainder of this talk, I'm going to show you a few ideas and thoughts if you want to implement inner source in your company, some of the major steps that you can take, and some of the major obstacles that you might find. Let's talk about tooling first. So, at Mercedes, when we started our journey on inner source, this is about 2017, 2018, we wanted to do inner source, but we weren't able to for mainly 3 reasons, and one of them, tooling. Everybody was working and developing software on a platform of their choice. Some were on GitHub, some on GitLab, there was Team Foundation Server, there was Bitbucket Stash, and so forth. So that doesn't make inner source collaboration impossible, but more difficult. So we decided, let's switch to one platform. And so we got together, and a bunch of engineers, 2 days, and we said, okay, which is it going to be? And after 2 days, they came out with a clear vote. 50% said GitHub and 50% said GitLab. So, okay, we actually went both ways. So decide on one platform for open source, or, all right, maybe 2. So it's in IT, mostly GitHub. In our R&D department, mostly GitLab. And it makes actually perfect sense. There are a lot of pros and cons for each platform. So it's good that we have these 2. All right. It doesn't, as I said, it doesn't make collaboration impossible. It is certainly possible, and much easier than if you have 10 platforms, right? Okay, so tooling. Second tooling, now that we have that sorted out, we found it's not that easy for people to discover what's there in inner source. How do they find inner source projects? Now, sure, GitHub and GitLab both have search capabilities, but they're not super good. I think they will be improved, but as for now, you type in things, but you don't really find stuff. So there's this tool called the Inner Source Discovery Platform, or a Discovery Portal. It's an open source project by SAP, or originally by SAP, and we have implemented that at home. and we've made some adjustments, and that's actually kind of nice. So I mean, check it out sometime. It gives you more possibilities. At this point, what I wanted to show you originally was that we have added AI capabilities. However, it's not finished yet, so I can't show you. We have a proof of concept that is already okay, but it's not. We haven't rolled it out yet. So what that does is, you can ask it smart questions like, "Hey, please give me a sample implementation of AngularJ in this context," or "Please show me all repositories that use this library," and then you can take a look at these. And see if they are fit for you. And you can ask other questions. Okay, so coming soon. Inner source discovery report, I think it's a nice thing. Tooling. I mean, obviously you could make an entire talk about tooling. Let's leave it at that for now. Next, legal, governance, and tax. That's got IT's people's eyes rolling usually. Oh, what? Do I have to deal with that? Well, yes, but you also deal with governance and legal stuff when you talk about licenses, right? And you don't have to deal with it like into the depths. That's why you have the people in your legal department. So, just wanted to, give you that. Think about contracts, especially if you're in a big corporation. So the second problem that we had when we started our inner source initiative was our contracts wouldn't allow us to do inner source. Why not? Because if somebody in the big corporation that is Mercedes-Benz had a contract with a development unit, they owned the exclusive rights to the code, and you were not allowed to share it with somebody else in the company. And that obviously puts a stop to inner source right there. Okay, so we had to first of all realize that, and second, change our contracts accordingly. Usually not a problem for small companies. For big corporations, multinational corporations, that is something to consider. Second, think about an inner source license. Again, if you're a small company, you will probably not need it, but in a big multinational corporation, you certainly do, because what do you do if one of the companies leaves the corporation? Are they still allowed to use the inner source stuff that they did when they were part of the company? Are we allowed to use whatever they produced back in the day? These are complicated questions, and an inner source license has to talk about these things. Okay? Governance, code of conduct. Here, this says open source code of conduct. That is something you need, I think. Inner source, maybe not, because everybody has a working agreement, that you sign, and in that it says, I will behave nicely, I will not insult other people, and so forth. Okay? But something to give a thought to. Code of conduct. Contribution guidelines, I think that's something you definitely need. If you want people contributing to your project, be it open source or inner source, you want to make it as easy for them as possible. And with the contribution guidelines, you describe, how do I contribute to your project? What do you want me to do? Okay? Definitely necessary. Now, tax. Let's talk about tax for a moment. Tax, when we started inner source, I was like, what the heck has that got to do with tax? Again, big multinational corporation, when you interchange code, or exchange code, sorry, between legal entities in different countries, tax could be an issue. Okay, because if you're in a cheap country, less taxes, and they give it to the high taxes country, it could result in tax infringement, and you don't want that. How to get around it? Some companies say that's the end of inner source. We're not even going to try. I wouldn't suggest you do that, but so you want to make it possible, okay? Now, what we did is we talked a lot to our tax people, and they were very helpful, and so we created a tax self-assessment. And what that does is it provides a guidance whether certain tax requirements are met, and if you can share your code between different entities. It's so, if you are a lawyer or familiar with this, the so-called arm's, arm's length principle. So that means free of charge code, sharing of code is possible if I would hypothetically agree to share it with third parties in open source. Okay? So, meaning it doesn't contain any secrets and there's no real value to it. I would share it with open source if, for example, it didn't contain Mercedes specifics. But so it could, maybe it's not interesting for anybody in open source, or I really have to put a lot of effort in it that's not worth my time, so I will not, but the code itself is not secret. Okay, and you have to answer a number of questions, and then that's an initial assessment whether sharing is okay from a tax perspective or not. All right? So now, every big company has been talking about this, but nobody talks openly about it. I would like to share with you our tax initial self-assessment. And so TNILM is, this is not legal advice. Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give legal advice, just so you know. So the questions are, first, these are questions that our developers have to answer before they open the repository in inner source, and they have to check all the boxes. Okay? Question 1, do you expect to receive contributions? So the idea of sharing something and getting back something. Please let us know why it is possible that people can contribute to your project. So, you know, for example, bug fixes or contribution features, something like that. And the third one, if no Mercedes-Benz specifics were included in the code, would you hypothetically agree to free of charge share it with other parties in open source? If you answer no on any of these, please talk to the tax people first. If you're okay with all of these, fine, you can do it. So every question has to be answered, and then it's an initial tax. That's a big word, okay. My question to you, if you're active in inner source already and you have something like this, consider sharing it as well, because we like to offer something, we like to receive something, we like to experience, to benefit from your experience as well. So if there's anything, you can share it. If not, take it, talk to your tax people, and let us know what they think. All right. Culture change. So that's usually, the other stuff is very complicated from understanding what you have to do. The cultural change is something that takes a little more time a lot of times in companies. So now we had the official okay from the C-levels, please go ahead, do inner source. But people weren't really doing it because the culture of sharing in the inner source wasn't there yet. So we created the Mercedes-Benz FOSS Manifesto. Some of you may have heard of it. It's a set of rules and guidelines which proclaim the importance of FOSS for modern tech organizations, and it's 3 parts: preamble, the company principles, and the employee principles. And the goal is to help facilitate the change from a company that was, closed source many years ago to a company that has open and inner source in their DNA, sort of. Okay, so it doesn't allow our engineers, yes, it's okay, you can participate in open source or inner source, but it actually sends them on that mission. So please do open source. And I'm not going to talk a lot about the FOSS Manifesto here, but just so here, from the company principles, 2 paragraphs that explicitly mention inner source. So first of all, the company will support you in using inner source and open source as well, FOSS projects, both in open and inner source. And it will give you the appropriate time to do so, because that used to be a problem, right? Our engineers would just, I don't have time. Is this company time anyway? I'll just do it tonight in my free time. It's like, no. There are laws on that as well, and we don't want that. If it's for the company, it's work related, please. it's company time. Okay, and then from the employee principles here, number one, it says, please look in open source first and look in inner source first before you buy something, a proprietary solution, or before you write code of your own. And then second here, please be active in inner source. And then three goes on about open source and so forth. If you are interested to take a deeper look, here is a link to the Mercedes-Benz FOSS manifesto. It's on our landing page, opensourcemercedes-benz.com, and in the top right corner here, you can find the manifesto. Several companies now have started adapting this, changing it, and doing it for their own company, like Siemens, Porsche, SAP, and a number of others. Deutsche Bahn even. Okay. Let's talk briefly about the mindset of sharing. So because a lot of times I hear people it's like, have you considered publishing this in inner source or open source? And they say, yeah, we're going to do that at some point, but it's not ready yet. It needs to be finished first. It's like, doesn't have to be finished. You can, at any point of time in the life cycle, publish something. So even if it's just an idea, just a thought, just put the idea out there. Get feedback from what people think. Hey, do you think this would be useful? Let me comment on that. Or you already have a prototype. That's fine. Or you're in the middle of development. Or, okay, fine, you have a version 1 and you're in the maintenance phase. But so most people say, I can only publish it in open or inner source if I'm here. But that's not the case. Something to keep in mind. Now, so we had the manifesto, we had the rules, we had the tax, we had everything sorted out. And then we thought people would just magically show up and do inner source. And that wasn't happening. We had one project called i3, and that was a big success, an infrastructure project. And the core team, they received more than 100 contributions in a year from outside. And 1,200 people in the Mattermost communities. It was like, yes, inner source is working. Yes, it was working for this project, but then there was a couple others, but then that's it. So we're like, oh, that's nice, but the rest is a bit disappointing, right? Why? Why is inner source staying behind its expectations? Compare it to open source. Now, note that open source projects are created for sharing from the start. And that's not necessarily the case with most projects in inner source, because they're usually tailored for very specific customer need. So if that's the case, don't expect that there will be a huge inner source community around it. Only about 2% of all open source projects are considered successful. That's just an estimate. And about 68.5% of all statistics are made up anyway, right? Sometimes on the fly. And so it's actually not reasonable to think that in inner source it would be different. Yeah. So don't expect that. And so you need to talk about expectations management. If you have 20 projects that are successful in inner source, yay. Now, another issue is people say, no, I don't want to publish this in inner source because I have to do so much more work. Like, I have to adapt the code because people will see my code, and right now it's not that super good. There are liability tax issues that I don't understand. Then there's, I have to make advertisement and community management, or nobody will find out about it. Then I have, I have no time. That's actually, I think, one of the main problems, because everybody's loaded with work up to here, right, and is not able to do work over there. Often an open source project can be found faster, which is actually perfectly fine. But that also says, no, I don't want to use the inner source project here. And then another thing is the middle management buy-in. Like engineers understand inner source, yeah, that's good. Executives, yeah, that's good, let's do that. Middle management, they understand, but if I have people from my team working on a project over there, then they work less on my projects, but I have to report my numbers as well. So they're not exactly too happy to foster inner source. Yeah, something we need to work on. Okay, so time and availability of your engineers is a problem. Everybody's too busy. There are deadlines I have to meet. I can't work over there. I don't want to think or solve anybody else's problem. I have enough of my own. I need to fulfill what I just mentioned, the numbers. Then is anybody going to say thank you? Probably not. You need to work on the culture there. And community management. There's also, IT people are usually very good at writing code, but not so good at community management. Like, if my project is good, the other people will automatically find out about it, right? Yeah, and that's just not going to happen. So, now, promising projects in inner source have these characteristics, in my opinion. They solve a common and widespread pain or demand. As I said, this i3 project of ours was an infrastructure project, something that everybody had to solve. That's why it was so successful. With company specifics, because if it doesn't contain company specifics, it's probably it's potential open source project, right? Needs to have a dedicated maintainer. Same problem in open source is, oh, you know what? We don't have maintainers anymore. We don't have time, but it's still a good project, so we'll just put it in inner source, and then somebody will take care of it. Not gonna happen, right? So, and so you need community management as well. Okay. So my recommendations. Oh yeah, side note, it's perfectly fine to have projects in inner source that don't really receive contributions, but others can look at it and learn from it. Yeah, some people say, oh, inner source done right is only with code contributions. Doesn't have to be. How do you know that people have looked at it and learned? I don't know. I think that's really difficult. Maybe when we have finished the AI capabilities, maybe then that's a way to find out. Yeah. So, key takeaways. If you're at the very beginning of your inner source journey, make the company fit for inner source with what I said, platform, tax, legal governance, these things. If you have that and it's not working, try to find out what the stumbling blocks in your company are. Try to remove them, work on them, and then talk a lot about it. Expectations management is a thing, because so in our company, inner source, we started inner source, and then a few months later, I heard some manager saying, "Oh yeah, but inner source is dead, isn't it?" It's like it hasn't even started yet. Come on, give it some time. Change takes time. Okay. And don't assume this will happen all by itself. Don't assume it will happen overnight. One thing I should have put on the slide as well is don't go and advertise it's going to save us a lot of money, because that's an anti-pattern in inner source. Okay? This will not be on anybody's Excel sheet. Oh, we saved so much money by inner source. Yeah, because somebody else then has to pay the developer time. Okay? So make it part of your OSPOS or ISPOS priorities, ideally. And that's it for now. Thank you. And may there always be wind in your hair. I think, thanks. So I have a clock here, and it has a few minutes. So for questions, I think there is a microphone. Are you the microphone? So the lady back there has a microphone. If you want to ask some questions, there is one. I'll try to answer them as best I can.
Yeah, you almost already answered it, but I want to ask anyway. So you said, yeah, it's not going to appear on the Excel spreadsheets. It's going to save us that much money. But anyhow, you probably want to measure the success of inner source in any way, at least after it's been around for 2-3 years.
Yeah.
So are there any metrics that you, how do you measure success of inner source?
Yeah. So I have two things that come to my mind right away. And it's actually a really good question because when I just mentioned, one of the managers came and said, "Inner source is dead anyway." How do you know that? Yeah. And how do you know it's alive? So my suggestion would be, number one, measure how many contributions you receive from outside of your team. Meaning code contributions, non-code contributions, also issues, requests, anything. Measure that. That's one. And the other thing is, so for this one library, for example, with infrastructure, if you have a way of measuring how many times it's downloaded in the company, that will also be a measure of success. Yeah? And you can say, every time you download this, you save X amount of money because you didn't have to develop it yourself or you didn't have to buy it from somewhere. Yeah? Attach a value to it or just give the numbers and say, roughly, I would say you save $10,000. Yeah? Okay, so these are two metrics I would recommend.
Thank you.
Thanks.
About the license questions, that's related also to taxes and so on.
Can you speak up a little bit, please? Just a little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About the license aspect and also related to taxes and so on, wouldn't it be best practice to directly apply an open source license on your inner source so you avoid such hassles to define a specific license which may not be opportunistic?
Yeah, okay. So I'm not a lawyer. I understand licenses a little bit, right? So from my understanding, I would say it's possible, but probably difficult. So example, when we drafted our inner source license, people thought, hey, let's just use MIT license and apply that. And then our lawyers went and were like, no, we need to add a chapter and we need to add something there. And then they came up with an inner source license that I think has 5 pages. Yeah. And then we looked at the result and we were like, wait, MIT, and you're coming up with this. But the reason is because of what I said with multinational corporations where legal entities may leave the company. And that is really something that's not in MIT. That's something you need to talk about. Yeah, who belongs to code, who is able to use it, and so forth.
Okay.
So I suspect it would probably not work.
Yeah, well, would work for smaller companies, but of course depends on the size of companies and complexity.
For a smaller company, it probably would work. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Anybody else? Okay, then we have some time left so we can dance silent disco. Okay. Thanks very much, folks. See you next time. I'm here tomorrow as well if you have questions. Thanks.